Christians, good evening. I hope you had a good Lord's Day. I trust it was profitable, and I hope you had an enjoyable weekend, one that I greatly enjoyed myself, in particular because many of you know that there are regulars on here that show up in a profile and that participate in these lives that I do. And a few of us, a few of my TikTok Christian family, we got together this weekend and we had a blessed time together. And I just want to say that because it's important to understand that the fellowship can come from any number of places, any number of directions. And sometimes the blessings you never see coming. But I had the tremendous benefit and blessing to be able to spend some time with brethren that I have had fellowship with on this platform, but yet have not seen in person. And I was able to do that with a few more people this past weekend. So I'm grateful and thankful for them. And what it also made me do is it inspired me, to want to look to do something to expand this particular thing and to do things to get Christian fellowships like this together throughout the year, 2 or 3 times a year, where many of us who know each other on this platform can get together in person and really enjoy fellowship at least 2 or 3 times a year. So that's something that I have in the back of my mind. And my brother Jeffrey, the encouraging servant, has also been on his mind. And so we are going to seek to be able to do this and do it more regularly and consistently. So today we're going to continue the exposition on the book of Job. And we dealt with, in the last section, the area of Job where his wife adds to his frustration, his inconvenience. She aids in adding to his despair, and she culminates her response to him, seeing him in ashes, scraping his boils on his body with potsherds. And the last words that we hear that come from her, leveled against her husband, was to curse God and die. To curse God and die. We know from what we have read up to this point that this whole experience that Job was having was not an experience having to do with anything he had done wrong. Thus, it was not because he was being punished for anything he had done wrong. In fact, it was quite the contrary. Satan wanted to make a point to God before the divine council, and he accused Job before God that Job would curse God, or that Job would curse God to his face if God were to allow Satan to take away all of his stuff. Satan believed that there was a hedge around Satan, and there was a hedge around Job, and the hedge was around Job's stuff, and that if he would just take away his stuff, he would curse God to his face. And now we see that there were 2 attempts on the part of Satan to do this, whereby he failed. And then he comes to Job's wife, excuse me for getting these guys mixed up every time. But when he comes to his wife, Satan takes a familiar pattern that he has had in the past, which was to approach the women or the woman of the godly man and to try to bring him down through her agency. We saw this in the garden. Satan did not go to Adam. he went to his wife. Others brought up examples of this in Scripture where we see the same pattern happening. We saw it with Samson and Delilah, Ahab and Jezebel, Potiphar's wife, and Joseph, David and Bathsheba. We've seen on many occasions where the devil has used the women of these godly men as instruments to bring them down. And Job was no exception. Job was no exception. And his wife said something that was beyond the pale by telling him to curse God and die. And we speculated much over what her demeanor was. Truth is, we really don't know. But we do know that when Job told her that she speaks as a foolish woman, and that she should remember and be reminded that it is the Lord who gives and the Lord who takes away, it is the Lord who brings into the earth and brings us to the earth, takes us away, gives us what we have when we're here. And that if God gives us good, shall he not give us evil as well? Job spoke well in his response to her comment. And so we know, and that after that, it was cleared by the highest of heaven itself. And it says that even in all of this, Job did not speak in a way that was contrary to godliness. And so now we have seen that God is the one who gave Satan the permission and the leave to do all these things, to bring all this despair upon Job. And God gave only one mandate. His life remains. Everything else that he has is in your hands. And if you remember, and if you can muster up recall, you will remember that God is the one who offered up Job. God is the one who offered up Job. Satan didn't bring up Job's name. God did. Have you considered my servant Job? What a fascinating piece of scripture that I feel is not often enough observed and expounded upon. And in many cases where it is, the depth of it has not really been met. And so what I'm hoping to do is inspire in all of you that extra measure of depth in your search to examine the things that can be gleaned out of this great text. I would surmise on one hand, that this book shows a significant, especially the first two chapters, it shows a significant understanding, or it exposes an understanding that we should have as it pertains to the sovereignty of God. Because remember, Job didn't know any of this that was going on. He had no idea the background behind his troubles. He had no idea. But what we know by reading the narrative is that all of this took place in heaven. Job did not know that it was God who put out his name. Job did not know that there was a dialogue between God and Satan about what to allow to happen to Job. And you read passages like this and you wonder, where is the will of man in any of this? Because all these things went down and none of it had anything to do with Job. There was no conference with Job. It was only with God and it was and with Satan. And they're talking about Job. Job's input was not requested. And remember that God allowed Satan to even take Job's children, all 10 of them. This should give us something. This should give us something of a heightened understanding of the glory and the almighty nature of our God and what is at his disposal to do of his own. He is under no obligation to act or to not act in any situation. Whatever he does is right. Whatever he does is right. And this is something that so many people have a hard time understanding. And I am hoping to explore some of these things in these next few verses, because we see that there was involved. We see all the scenarios that we're looking at. God is involved. The sons of God in heaven are witnesses of what the discussion was about. Satan is there, having his dialogue with the Almighty God. Then you have Job's wife gets in on the act, unbeknownst to her that Satan had her at his disposal as well. And now we come to verse 11 of chapter 2. And Lord willing, we're going to get through verse 11 through verse 13 of chapter 2, because this is when Job's friends come into town to sit with him and to converse with him and to mourn with him. And I'm taking a little time to deal with just these 3 verses tonight, because I think that it is very enlightening, as I trust it will be to you as it has been to me. And I hope that we will also be able to extract a few things out of this together that may have been overlooked by me and others for that matter. So I will start by reading these 3 verses, Job chapter 2, verse 11 through 13, and then I will go to the panel for opening remarks regarding the introduction into the narrative of Job with his 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. So verse 11. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that had come upon him, they came every one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. For they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him, that is Job, and to comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off, they knew him not. They lifted up their voice and they wept. And they rent every one his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days, 7 nights, and none spoke a word unto Job, for they saw that his grief was very great. Now, I'm going to start by talking to the panel and get your opening remarks so far, and then we'll carry on with the exposition. So I'll start with Sister Lisa. Opening remarks.
Well, the opening remarks for these verses, they seem very hopeful. You know, we know what happens as we go on later, but we see here that he had friends who seemed as though they were going to, comfort him and support him, and which is a good thing. And it's, I guess without not, moving on ahead, we know how that went. So the opening remarks would be, I would hope that if I was in a state like this, that, I could find support in my brothers and sisters as well. So that's all I have to say so far.
Amen. Brother God's Word, welcome, my friend. I'm glad you're here. And what are your opening remarks?
Those same friends who are coming to comfort him also are going to accuse him and judge him later, as we know, and accuse him of things of which they'd have no understanding that it's God's will that Job is suffering these things, and they, like Christ, it was one of the connections there. You asked when you started this exposition about how Job was Christ-like. This is one of the ways his friends accuse him, just kind of like Christ was accused. So,
Right.
Just going to be my opening remark there.
Absolutely. Sister Meg, opening remarks.
I just can't wait to get into Job's three friends. There's a lot to unpack here, including the meaning of their names. So I'm really excited to get started with this because it's going to reveal a lot. So excited tonight. Welcome home, and I'm glad you guys made it safe.
Thank you very much, sister. Appreciate that. Sister Joni, opening remarks.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So this is really interesting parts of Job where the friends, they do try to support him, but they don't do a real good job. So it's kind of interesting. And I think there's a lot to be said for what happens in real life, drawing conclusions to our real lives. And sometimes we can learn from that.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Brother
That's
Jeffrey, were you done, Joni? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's everything I got. Thank you.
Brother Jeff, encourage and serving. Go ahead.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, panel. And Jonathan, glad that you're home. It's really a great visit this weekend. My only comment is the fact that we're going to learn tonight that Job's three friends, even though they did come, of course, to comfort Job, they didn't really do a very good job. And I think you can almost say they made things worse. But I did find one thing interesting, Jonathan, that the name Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar have an interesting translation to our language today, and that is Mo, Larry, and Curly. I mean, that's about as much good as they did Job while they were there. I mean, they sort of made the situation worse as opposed to, their heart was in the right place. But when they came to Job, Jonathan, I've often wondered, did they offer him food? Did they find out if he still had food, if he still had access to something to drink? Did he have a tent to sleep in at night? And yet we read that his three friends sat down beside him for 7 days and never said a word. Now, that's the Jewish tradition. When someone is mourning, you let the person that's mourning speak first. Okay? So they did their part in that regard, but we don't hear anything about them offering anything to Job for immediate help, food, shelter, whatever. So I think it's going to be interesting to find out more about this and exactly what their intentions are here. That's all I've got.
No problem. Thanks, brother. Brother Jeff, man of God, your thoughts.
Good evening. Actually, Joni and Jeffrey and I are all still in the same place. We have not gone home yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm in my bedroom, so we won't have any positive feedback. But I found out something this weekend with interacting with Jeffrey and Jonathan is that we were all three separated at birth. I think that somebody had triplets and then they farmed us all out because they couldn't stand having us all three together. But anyway, I did have something serious to say. What Jeffrey's talking about, I want to add to that. I mean, I wonder where where the Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva came from. When somebody has lost a loved one, that's what you do. You go sit with them for a while in mourning. And it certainly fits with what Jeffrey says, not to say anything, just to kind of sit with them. And, it's his, as well-meaning as they are, they were steeped in the thought of if something bad happens to you, you must have sinned, and that even carried through to the New Testament, because, the man born blind, did he or his parents sin? Neither. He was born this way to see to the glory of God, and that's what's happening here. Same thing. Job is undergoing this for the glory of God.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what I got to say, my brother.
All right, brother. Thanks a lot. Sister Candy, your thoughts, opening remarks.
I just see the difference in them not displaying the compassion and the the comfort of being around him versus their harshness of condemning, so to say, for his sins, blaming him. It's his fault. Even though, they sat with him for 7 days in silence, but it seems like during that time together, they were sitting there conjuring on what he had done that he needed to ask for forgiveness for.
Mm-hmm.
And technically, he hadn't really done anything. But it's just the difference in when we say we bear our fellow brothers and sisters' burdens with them and displaying the compassion and helping pick them up instead of knocking their feet out from under them.
Right. Absolutely. Sister Mariah, your thoughts?
Yes. What I find interesting is that when they arrived, they did not recognize him. So all that he had went through, they could not understand or, see that it was their friend. The friend that they once knew and recognized, they could not tell that was him. So I found that interesting. So they probably understood that they needed to take it a little bit more serious and sit in silence, because there's a lot that has been taking place over these course of days or whenever the time frame of which it happened. So I find that interesting.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for that, sister. And listen, so, what I think about these guys, because I think that these comforters, I mean, we most of us know, the story, and we're going to read through it, again, and go through the whole, going through this whole book. But it's like every time I read through the book of Job, I don't see them in the harsh light that I started out seeing them the first time I read it. In other words, I think that the more and more I read it, the less I feel as harshly about them as I started out with. Now, don't get me wrong. As I've said in many times in this whole problem, in this whole situation, these men were not stupid people, and they were not ungodly men. They were men of dignity, and they were men who had reputations as well as Job, not as stellar as Job, not to the level of Job perhaps, but these men were men of dignity. They were well-known men. They were men of wisdom. You can't read the book of Job without hearing it, because these 5 men in total, they engage in some very, very powerful conversations. But when it comes to Elihu, Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and which one of them is Bildad, all of these men, when they were speaking to Job, they were correct for the most part in the things that they were saying, but they were wrongly, they were not applying these things to Job. In other words, what I'm saying, here, let me put it this way. They were misapplying these things that they were saying to Job. They said a lot of true things, they just did not apply to Job. This is what I'm saying. They were saying true things that were not true about Job, but true things nonetheless. Now, I will make the argument, as I intend to do going forward, that the problem that in this whole situation with Job, the problem that Satan had was that he did not understand God's sovereignty. Even Satan. The problem with Job's wife, she did not understand God's sovereignty. The problem with Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, Elihu, the problem that they had, they did not understand God's sovereignty. They didn't. And the funny thing is, the only one who understood the sovereignty of God in this whole narrative was Job. He was the only one who understand. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. I was born naked, and I will leave naked. I will take the good and I will take the evil. All come from God. Job was the only one who understood God. And he never charged God foolishly. These men, they charged Job foolishly. His wife charged Job foolishly. Satan charged God and Job foolishly. The problem here, brethren, the problem here is what you are seeing taking place with the reactions of folks to Job. Their responses and their treatment and their words is the result of them not understanding what Job knew, that God was sovereign in all things, the good and the evil. And so what we start to see unfold when his friends begin to speak and talk, we're going to see what happens and how men apply biblical truths to other believers, especially when they don't understand the sovereignty of God. The result, when you look at the immaturity of a Christian, the greater distance there is between their understanding of God's sovereignty results in an increase of ignorance and a lack of discernment in how you apply these truths in people's lives, in their own. So how we deal with things is inextricably linked to what we understand about God. And so I'm hoping to bring this out, and I'm hoping that with your help, we will bring it out together. So in this new theme that unravels in Job's affliction, his friends come. Notice it says that they made an appointment together. They made an appointment. They set a time. And here's the thing. So this indicates that, first of all, they heard about what went down. They heard about Job's situation. They heard about it. They knew about it. And when they did, they made an appointment together, and they communed amongst themselves and said, we're going to get down there to go mourn and comfort our brother. Like my brother Kaz says, welcome, brother. They made a plan together to go. And I'm going to tell you something. We need to understand and look at how we will address somebody, because we can look at the miserable comforters as we have called them, but I can tell you something. We call these men miserable comforters for decades. I don't know who has started that whole thing, but it's not in the Bible that they were miserable comforters, but I understand the reasoning behind it. But I can tell you, I can't think of a time where my response to somebody going through something was as good as theirs. Because their responses and what they did, it was good. Their intentions were right. They made an appointment and they showed up. They showed up. Before you start beating on these guys, how many times have you not shown up? Think about that for a second. How many times do you say, I'm going to be there for you, and you actually showed up? It's difficult for people to show up for a good time. How much less likely is it going to be that you show up for somebody who is in a mournful situation, especially if they lost all, and you will do all that you can to avoid going, because you are afraid someone's going to ask you for something. Think about it. Before you get on these beat up these guys, look through these guys and look at that person in the mirror and ask yourself, these guys made an appointment and they showed up. They knew what he went through and they came anyway. Then it says that they made an appointment together. They all agreed and they all came on this journey to meet with their dear brother Job. And it says that they came, and it says what they came to do. They had a mission. They came to mourn with him, and they came to comfort him. Did they do that? We see that they missed the mark. However, that was their intention. And the argument that I am making is that a significant reason as to why they missed the mark is because they did not understand what Job understood, that God is sovereign. They would not have applied so many of these things that they said to Job if they understood God. How we act with other brethren is linked to how we understand God. Make no mistake about that. If you get nothing out of this conversation, understand this. How you treat other believers who are struggling, how you treat anybody who is struggling, how you respond to someone else's struggles, how you respond to someone else's despair, their condition, their health, how you respond or your lack of a response is indicative of how you understand God. Sister Lisa, go ahead.
Well, I just had a thought and and how this applies to all of us. If they had realized the sovereignty of God, obviously the response would have been different. It's like it would have been better for them, their presence just to be there, but to be quiet, stay quiet. Because even knowing that, having said it to Job, well, God is sovereign and you know he gives and you know he takes away. These are facts. It's not always helpful though to the person who is suffering. So, I mean, when I'm thinking about it, I look back and sometimes it's better just to be there and let them say what they need to say versus trying to, if they ask, maybe, it's God's will. It's God's will. But I don't know how that is helpful in the face of someone who is like Job, let's say. So that was just my thought. If they really had known, maybe they would have kept quiet. I don't know.
Right.
Just something to think about.
Yep. We'll certainly talk about that. Sister Joni, go ahead.
I was just thinking that sometimes when people are going through great loss, a lot of people don't even know what to say. So if they're not quiet, they'll say something that may be hurtful.
Right. Well, I think that, and this may or may not be going towards the point Lisa was making, but I think sometimes, we all know that if you get a gathering of folks together in any situation, especially Christians, if there is someone who's downcast or whatever the situation is going on, people today can't stand to deal with the void of silence. People have a tendency to feel that they always have to say something. It's so everyone has to be so voluminous in their words. Sometimes, most of the times, less is better. Sometimes less is better. These guys found this out later on. And God didn't condemn them He says, basically he tells them, you know what, you got it wrong, but my Job, my servant Job is going to straighten you guys out. Now these men were they had a great reputation. They were known for their learning, and they were counselors. These were wise men. These were not like shabby guys. These were guys who knew God. They were understanding. They had wisdom. They understood things. But God told us that Job was the one that was top tier. God put his best forward when Satan came presented himself. God put his best man forward. And this is what happens to the best of the best. Look what happened to our apostles and prophets. Slain, killed, beheaded. This is what happens if you have aspirations for good and godly service, and you are effective in your understanding about God, and you have a tremendous understanding about God. You know he's sovereign. You know all these things. You are a person of extreme high caliber faith. This is the kind of thing that happens to those folks. These are the first string, as it were, of God's people who he can put in place to deal with the greatest of battles. And these silly arguments that go on in these profiles and these lives or whatever, these aren't battles. Most of them are stupid. And so every now and then you might get one where somebody says something pretty good, whatever, but there's no consistency there. But the warfare of the Christian is not in winning arguments and debates. It is overcoming sin, overcoming temptation, enduring affliction, and maintaining your faithfulness to God, never speaking falsely against him or accusing him falsely, but always being prepared to vindicate God in every situation. If that happened, God ordered it. Well, what are you talking about? There was 2 million kids killed. God ordered it. God is good. Shall not the judge of the earth do right? Yes, he will always. Whatever he did is for his glory and for his purpose. God can raise the dead. But so many in Christianity are caught up with trying to honor God through human means and human passions. It's difficult. And we're dealing here with a series of great men of God. All of them, Job on down, all great men of God. And look what they were going through. But the one who had the greatest understanding was Job,